Ole Miss versus Georgia, Saturday at 7 o'clock Eastern on ESPN. I'll promise you Sanford Stadium is going to be a factor here. It's going to be a big factor. Current FanDuel number on this is Georgia minus 10.5. You shave out home field, and that's somewhere around a touchdown that is considered to be separating these teams on a neutral field. And Sanford Stadium gets a night game. A night game, top 15. I think, Jesse, where does the AP have Ole Miss ranked? They got to be top 15, right? I never look at the AP. I literally have no clue where the AP has teams ranked. Anyway, I'm very interested in a number of things here. The first thing that I think will go a long way in deciding this game is Carson Beck just going to be sharp? We talked the other day about how all these first-year starters at quarterback had their ups and downs, and Beck really hasn't. His downs have been so mild compared to what Jalen Milroe went through earlier in the year, what Drew Aller went through on the road against Ohio State. Joe Milton has looked terrible in like the Florida game earlier this year. Carson Beck hadn't had that. Doesn't mean he can't, just means he hadn't had it yet. Ole Miss is 7th in the country in sack rate. It may be the best pass rush Georgia will have faced so far this year. So I'm just interested as that confidence starts to build in the play calling for Carson Beck and the execution within Carson Beck. If all of a sudden a little bit different kind of pressure's put on you, is there one or two errant balls? Do you get maybe a tip ball at the line of scrimmage that falls into the wrong pair of hands that changes the course of the game early, and maybe you find yourself down like you did against South Carolina? Maybe it's not as easy to come back. That's the first thing I'm interested in. But the whole question about whether Georgia's defense can handle this Ole Miss offense is very abstract. That's like really wide, too wide of a net for me. So I want to look within the net, and I want to focus on explosive plays because Ole Miss has 65 of them this year of 20-plus yards. That's good for third in the country. They've been really good at popping the explosive play. Georgia is number 12 defensively in preventing the explosive play. But that's where my Ole Miss brethren probably DM me or hop in the live chat and say, yeah, but what kind of offense has Georgia faced that would expose that vulnerability, even if it is a vulnerability? And my answer is, I'll grant you that. They haven't really faced any offense that's really built to do that. I mean, Auburn wasn't. I'm going to talk about the Auburn game in a second. I think there is something to glean from that. South Carolina really in Sanford Stadium wasn't. We were dealing with road rattler that day instead of home rattler. So I guess to answer your question, if there is that crack in the dam for Georgia, maybe no one has been built to expose it. But that's if. That's if the crack is there. The second thing, which coincides with the most important player in this game, is Jaxson Dart has to play his full game. When I went to the Auburn game and I watched them push Georgia, and it was really close, it took Georgia until late in that game to grab a lead and hold on to it, I asked myself, why was it that close? Well, it was that close because Peyton Thorne had 12 carries for 92 yards that day, and Auburn ran it for nearly 220 total. A lot of that they had by the start of the fourth quarter. So the reason I mention that is because in terms of skill set, Jaxson Dart's well beyond what Peyton Thorne is, but he is the most dangerous mobile threat they have seen since then. And you wonder again, if you're looking for cracks in the dam, if that's one, if that mobile threat at quarterback, if just the ability to improvise on broken plays, if not designed play calling and mobility at quarterback may disproportionately give you trouble, well, Jaxson Dart's the guy to expose that, but he's got to have that combined with a really, really good showing through the air. And that doesn't mean throwing the ball 50 times or anything like that, but there's only so much you can do with a hot quarterback. You can go all the way back to when Kirby was at Bama. You face a hot quarterback in college, especially when you've had the talent that Georgia has had depart to the NFL. I don't even care if you do have the NFL talent there, but especially when you've watched those guys walk out the door and you're continually trying to fill and backfill, I guess, and then you get a hot quarterback, you got a lot of guys who have not seen that. There are a lot of guys on Georgia's defense right now that if Jaxson Dart gets rolling, have not faced a quarterback playing like that. It's all an if. It's all an if. That's why I think he's one of the most important players in this game. If Ole Miss can't run it, though, they're in major trouble, because Georgia is number 3 in the country defensively on third downs. They are great at getting teams off the field. And Ole Miss, and this could be a pre-paper pop, This could be a pre-padlock here. Ole Miss offensively is 97th on converting third downs. So you got to totally invert that stat profile. That's why I think Jaxson Dart's legs are so important. And also, you know what? If we were to just take that stat further, Georgia's offense is 4th in the country on third down, and Ole Miss's defense is 81st. So I may have buried the lead. It may just be a third down game. Let's take a look at what the FanDuel number is right now compared to what the model thinks. The model is a little bit bigger on Georgia than the current FanDuel number, which is Georgia minus 10.5. The Pate State model has Georgia minus 11.5, but I'm not doing that because I think that we've probably inflated Georgia a tad in the model this year. So I'm going Georgia to win the game. I will go Ole Miss with anything 10 or more, plus the points, obviously, is what I mean by that. It could get so real so quick here, though, because I want you to think about something for a second. If Georgia wins, forget everything I'm about to say. If Georgia loses, the next thing you do is you look at what Tennessee did earlier in the day. Jesse, what time does the Tennessee game start, by the way? 3:30. Okay, so the Tennessee game will have already been played. If Tennessee beats Missouri, and then later that night you watch Georgia lose to Ole Miss, you just set up an SEC East championship game next week in Knoxville. You essentially set up an SEC championship play-in game. It could happen that quick. And then I want you to think about this. Okay, everyone knows what the glass half full scenario is for Georgia, and they've earned benefit of the doubt. But there is this nightmare scenario, I call it the Oklahoma protocol, where in the span of 8 days, your entire season gets wrecked. You're undefeated, you're on top of the world, you lose to Ole Miss, or in their case, you lose to Kansas, and then you lose to Tennessee, or in their case, you lose to Oklahoma State, and it's done. It's over. That's how quick it can happen. That's why coaches act so paranoid all the time. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. I'm taking Georgia to win. I'm taking Ole Miss to cover. But I, at the very least, think this is the toughest test that Georgia will have faced so far this year. It's a lot to overcome. It's a lot to overcome for Ole Miss. Play it at a neutral site, it's tough enough. That is playing 12 men Saturday night, playing against them in Sanford Stadium. Night game, they just don't get that a whole lot over there. So you got it to do, Lane Kiffin. You got it to do.